Meeting. Welcome to the 3 p.m. Work session on and recognize Patrick Nyland.
Thank you, Chair. The goal of this presentation is to give the board an update on where we are with EMS service, to present the information of the stakeholders group that concluded last year, and then to get some direction with EMS service moving forward. So just to give you a kind of a snapshot of where we are currently, Union EMS was established in 1985 to provide emergency medical care to the citizens of Union County. It's a county function, but since 1997 that has been operated by Atrium Health. Current contract extension was approved in October of 2022, and it goes through June 30th of 2024. The reason we're bringing this to you so soon before the contract expiration is it is fairly complicated. So if there are things we want to do, we need a little bit of time to incorporate them into any new agreement we would have. The county's responsibility is to provide funding through capital and operations, and Atrium's responsibility is to provide emergency medical services. Atrium derives its funding mainly through county tax dollars and billing for users of that system. Currently, personnel fall into generally two main categories, either a paramedic or an EMT. A paramedic is the highest level care you can receive from EMS personnel. They are the paramedics. They have the most amount of training, the most amount of experience. EMTs are able to provide basic life support services. Calls for service are categorized as basically ALS or BLS. Again, the ALS are the advanced level calls, your cardiac calls, some of your calls that require drugs, IVs, that sort of thing. Current deployment model calls for 14 ambulances from 10 a.m. to 9:59 p.m. and 11 from 10 p.m. to 9:59. Now, this is not in the contract as a metric. It is a goal that we are hoping that they hit, and it's what we measure them daily. But in the contract, it is based on priority one calls, how quickly they are getting to the priority one calls 90% of the time. So all these calls that you're going to see are measured to the 90th percentile. This is just a little bit of background. In 2012, EMS moved away from 24-hour shifts and mainly static bases to 12-hour shifts and mainly dynamic deployment. You can see in 2015, it was the second year of dynamic deployment. They still maintained two bases. There was one in Stallings and the one at the hospital. The one in Stallings was on William Rescue. It was called the William Rescue Station. 2017, they closed the Stallings base, so that left only the base at Union East in Monroe. In 2017, we also saw a downward trend in staffed hours, and as you'll see, some of this was attributed to the dynamic model. It is a model that is hard on the employees of that system. They're in a truck 24 hours a day. They don't get much of a break, and they're constantly moving around. In 2019, we put a computer system in place to help anticipate calls and where we should place trucks. That is called Marvelous. So it looks at past history, it looks at the number of trucks on the road, and said you should put a truck here in anticipation that calls are going to happen in this area of the county. In 2020, COVID hit, and we really saw an issue with response times and staffing. COVID did a lot of things, and one thing it did is it gave EMS personnel some options to go work in other facilities, and we saw a lot of them leaving for other opportunities during that time. In 2022, we put the stakeholders group together to look at some of the issues we were having with staffing and to also look at what was being proposed by Atrium at that time, which is what I'm about to get into. Right now, we measure in three zones in the county. You have an inner, an outer, or a core, an inner, and an outer. So the core is along Highway 74 from Marshville to Stallings. The inner is just outside of that, and then the outer is what you'd consider your rural Union County. This is the report that we get every month to say how well they are meeting the contract obligations. So what you'll see is shoot times, response times, and the response times, the only one we're measuring here are priority one calls. So that is what is in the contract. So somebody that's stubbed a toe and calls for an ambulance, that is not a priority one call. These are the most severe calls, the ones that we need to get an ambulance to these folks quickly. Going back here at the bottom, what you can see is with Dynamic and with the Marvelous system, it is predicting that most of the calls are going to happen in your core area. So what you'll see is that this does a very good job of responding to those core calls along 74, because that's what history has said where the calls are going to happen. You start getting out into the more rural parts of the county, and we start to struggle a bit because calls don't happen out that way with enough frequency to determine the truck needs to be out there. So it's really, you keep your trucks in the center of the county, and as those calls come, you have to go out into the county. So some of those response times are a little bit higher just because of the predictability and the number of calls that happen in the rural area. In 2022, the board asked us to put a stakeholders group together to look at some of the challenges we were having and come up with some recommendations to bring back to the Board of County Commissioners. Had 16 individuals. We had meetings from February to May. And this is the kind of the approach we took at it. The current state, performance expectations, alternate approaches, and ultimately some recommendations back to the Board of County Commissioners. Commissioner Rushing and Commissioner Richard Helms were on that committee, along with everyone else you see on the screen. There was a mix of fire, police, we had both hospitals represented, and representatives from Atrium Health, or EMS, Atrium EMS. There were 8 considerations that ultimately the group looked at and made some type of recommendation. We're going to focus on 2 of them. One was to modify the deployment model to have a mix of static locations and dynamic deployment. So dynamic deployment is you're in a truck 24 hours a day, it's moving around, the computer's telling you where to move. A static location is a base. It's a fixed base somewhere in the community that you park a truck out and you respond from that location. The other recommendation is, as it become clear that paramedics were getting very hard to hire and recruit, what Atrium has looked at is incorporating BLS units into the response. Right now, we call for 100% ALS service. So all the ambulances you see on the road have a paramedic on that truck. That is great, but it is very hard to staff. And
Okay, just
yes, sir.
real quick for the benefit of the other 2 commissioners. ALS is advanced life-saving. BLS is basic life-saving. Again, just whether we have a paramedic on the truck or 2 EMTs.
Yes, if it has a paramedic, it's an ALS unit. If it had paramedic or EMTs, it would be a BLS unit. So EMTs are a little bit easier to hire for, and the majority of the calls that we get only require a BLS service. So what Atrium has also asked for is to incorporate some BLS-specific units into the deployment model, so you're not sending a paramedic to a stub tow, so you can triage calls as the appropriate level of service dictates. Because right now we are sending a paramedic to every call that gets answered by CCOM. So consideration 1. This is a snapshot from the committee. These were notes that were taken, so you can see some of the benefits. Community members know where those static locations are. You drive by a base, you see that ambulance, you have a better feeling because you know where that ambulance is going to come from. Right now, those ambulances move constantly, so you have no idea where it's going to be at any point during the day. It places units into the community. These crews get to know their community members. You know that truck is the one that's going to be in New Salem or Allen's Crossroad. If they have bases, it's better for employee morale. You have a place where they can get out of the truck, they can sit down, they can take a shower if they need to, they can get a snack. They don't have to be sitting in a truck 24 hours a day. Right now, you might see them, they're sitting on the side of the road, they're getting out, they're walking around, but they really don't have any place to go into to sit down and relax. One of the staffing challenges has been we run 100% dynamic deployment model, and not many of the communities surrounding us do, and not many of the communities in this state do. Most have some mix of static bases and dynamic, with the majority still being static bases. The other thing this does is when you're running a dynamic model, your trucks are running constantly. They're either idling or they're moving. So we are putting a ton of miles on these vehicles, which are very expensive vehicles, just to move them from point A to point B. Not in response, just to get them where the computer is saying to put them. Recruitment becomes a little bit easier. Again, since none of these agencies are running this model, not many of them want to come to a model like this. Right now they have bases, they have stations they can go into, they can sit down and relax, and when we're recruiting, we say we don't have any of that. We have a truck you got to be in for your entire shift. And ultimately, with some of the maintenance costs, there is some possibility this is a more cost-efficient method over the long run. There are some initial upfront capital costs that we still need to figure out, but over time, you have these vehicles on the road less and they're lasting longer, and you don't have to replace them as often. Some of the downsides. It's costly. Initial upfront for capital in these bases could be costly. We are investigating possibilities with other fire departments, with churches, with maybe some of the schools. So there are opportunities to partner with some of the community members to reduce the cost, but there would be some upfront capital expense. Dispatch would be more complex. Right now, the computer tells these trucks where to go. When you have a mix of hybrid and static, and you have one of those static units that goes out of service, you got to backfill with that. So moving those along, it'd just be different than what we're doing right now. And again, a lot of this is about staffing, giving employees, we're burning employees out, and we can see that from some of the exit interviews that Atrium has done. They just don't want to work a model like this constantly. By having a hybrid unit, you could have some that are working dynamic, some that are working static, but you could also switch them. So nobody gets burned out at any given time. You can move them around, you can move them around to different bases if you wanted to, just to keep things unique for them. The other consideration is to implement BLS units into the response. Again, like I said, right now we have 100% ALS response, so any ambulance you're getting has those paramedics on it. By moving to a BLS triaged approach to this, you could have more trucks on the road. EMTs are not as hard to recruit for right now as paramedics. It doesn't require the same level of training, and a lot of your folks that can get an EMT already have your EMT. It's just trying to get the EMTs to get a paramedic has been a challenge. And if they get a paramedic, they, again, with that much training and that much experience, they have options to go work in hospitals, go work in private practice. At that point, the life just becomes a little bit different. You have options to not have to be in a truck 24 hours a day. It creates opportunities. If you bring more EMTs on, you can grow those EMTs into your paramedics. Service levels, just by nature of having more trucks on the road, you should have a better response. And then again, you're able to match those BLS units to the call. We're not sending paramedics to a stub toe. You can send an EMT to that call, the person can handle that call, and if needed to, they can transport. Some of the challenge with this is in order to match the care to the level, it takes a little more time on the front end. So our CCOM employees would have to go through what they call an EMD. They have to ask a bunch of questions to determine what level of care these individuals need. Now, if someone calls and said, I have shortness of breath, or I think my father's having a heart attack, they're going to send a paramedic. There's some buzzwords that if they say it, they're sending the highest level of care immediately. But if you get into a call and you don't think they need an ALS unit, you start asking questions. And that just takes a little bit of time. It doesn't take a ton of time, but it takes more than it is right now. Because right now we just send a paramedic to every call all the time. In order to incorporate this, you just have to ask some questions to determine if a paramedic is required or can it be handled by a BLS unit. This takes some training not only to EMS but also to our CCOM folks. Right now they are not used to doing this. They do EMD a call, but they don't ever get to a point where they're sending a BLS unit. So it's some training we have to do internally to make sure they understand it and what we're trying to accomplish. The concern is you under triage a call. You go through the questions, you answer them or they answer them, you send the appropriate level of what you think is unit, you send a BLS unit, they get there and say, this guy's having a heart attack, we need a paramedic. That is the concern. There's ways to mitigate that, obviously, with training, but that is the concern, that if the individual on the phone doesn't answer the questions correctly, or they don't know what they're looking at, that you could get to a call and not have the appropriate level of response. Where they are proposing to put these BLS units is by the hospital. So if that were to happen, they load the individual up, they get them to the hospital where they do have that advanced level care. This is a map that EMS has put together about where the potential locations would be. These are not set in stone. These are based on a geographic region where they can respond to. David, can you tell me how many?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. So everywhere within this post, they can respond to within 10 minutes. And you can see it covers most of the county at that point. Everything beyond these 7 posts would be dynamic models. So they would still be in a truck, they'd be moving around, and you can see they're posted closer to the hospital. So if you did need to get someone to a hospital quickly, they can respond. Again, these are general areas. There is a certain amount of flexibility we have to move these posts half a mile or so. So we do not have locations set, and part of this presentation is try to get direction from the board whether you all want us to explore that. But these are general locations of where these postings could be, these static bases. This speaks a little bit to the dynamic model and how we are running these trucks. You can see in fiscal year 15, we put 475,000 miles on the fleet. And we're at almost 800,000 miles, and we probably will be over 800,000 miles for fiscal year 23. Maintenance has gone up, one, because things are just more expensive now, and two, we are putting a lot more miles. So even routine maintenance, we're doing almost twice as much of now as we were with fixed locations. Fuel cost, as fuel continues to go up, every mile we put on a truck, that is a higher cost we have to pay for fuel. And you can see the cost, $275,000 in fiscal year 15 to a little over $1 million in fiscal year 22. It is a major expense that these static locations would help us mitigate. This is a snapshot of EMS's fiscal year 24 request. Last year, we funded them between county tax dollars and fees at a little over $14 million. It was $14,102,400, and they have asked for $17,121,516. Almost $2.5 million of that is capital, replacing these ambulances, replacing support vehicles because they're on the road so much.
And even when they're sitting still at these locations and waiting to go, they're on, and the air conditioner's going or the heat's going. And
they cannot shut the vehicles off because of the electronics on the vehicle. It has to keep running to keep charging those battery systems.
So when they're at a static, or when they're at a location like a fire department or a school or wherever we could do, they would still be on, or they would be off?
What we would do is install shore power so they could plug in, they turn off the truck, and it would still keep all those systems operating.
Okay.
This is a 10-year look at their capital needs, just to give you a sense of what things are costing. So a remount. So what you can do is the box on an ambulance. You can remount that on a new chassis. About every 4 years, you have worn the chassis out. So the engine, the transmission, the frame. But you can remount that box on a new chassis, and it's about half the cost. So what they typically do is you can get one remount out of a box. So you figure one box will last 8 years, one chassis will last 4 years. So you remount those boxes onto a new chassis. Replacement ambulances are $441,000. So again, that's a lot of money, and that's in today's dollars. It's not unlikely that the next ambulance we need to replace is going to be $500,000, and it's just the cost of the equipment going into it, cost of steel, cost of labor, everything is going up. So the more we can do to keep these vehicles on the road longer, the more it'll help us long term. Support vehicles, that's the supervisor vehicles you see, F-150s, Durangos, Tahoes, that sort of thing. It's about $42,000 kitted out. And then this includes their tablets, their computers, their laptops, that sort of thing. This is a snapshot of a detailed snapshot of fiscal year 24 requests. So you can see they are going to remount 8 ambulances. So that's taking the box off an old ambulance, putting it on a new chassis. There's 2 support vehicles, and then a number of the smaller items, the ruggerized laptops that they have in the trucks, tablets, and then some office equipment for the base. We have not adjusted fees in almost 10 years for EMS service. And the way EMS works is it's 100% cost to the county, either through fees or county tax dollars. So they have run an analysis of surrounding areas, and the best practice is about 150% of the Medicare cost is what we should be charging. You can see that we're close on some and we're not close on others. So as part of our recommendation moving forward, it's that we should look at these fees more often and adjust them, because we really haven't in 10 years. Because anything that the fees aren't paying for, county tax dollars do. So we really need some direction on the board on what you want to see. We haven't done, the county has not done a great deal of detail. Atrium has a fair amount of time invested in determining the hybrid model and the ALS, BLS. But depending on what the board wants, we hadn't had a chance to share the results of the stakeholders group. So that's mainly what we wanted to do today, but also get feedback from you all is what do you want us to come back with? Do you want us to come back with more detail? Would you like Atrium to do a presentation and say this is exactly how a hybrid deployment model would work and a triaged ALS, BLS response would work? The other thing we'd like direction on is would you want us to incorporate those fees into the budget document? And we don't have to make that decision today, but we wanted to get it in front of you just to say we haven't looked at this in a long time and we think we probably should adjust some of those fees. And then is there anything else, any information you'd like beyond what's been presented today?
Mr. Chair. Patrick, just a quick question. You know, I understand what you're saying about the problems in recruitment. Has there been, and is there any kind of existing program where we partner with SPCC to provide training to these folks, sort of a pathway into a job kind of deal? Anything that you know of that exists currently? Yeah,
we have two, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, we have some folks with Atrium here that they can answer specific questions. So David, if you want to come up, but we do have an EMT academy and a paramedic academy that they are working with through SPCC.
And while we're waiting on him to come up, Melissa, Vice Chair Melissa Merrill, she can maybe explain a little bit about what the schools are doing at Monroe and Monroe Middle to provide that medical, what y'all call it, the medical academy. You want to tell about that a little bit real quick?
I don't have any information.
Oh, okay. But they've got it at Monroe Middle and Monroe High to hopefully feed into SPCC to be able to recruit even more, which would be a fantastic job for kids coming out of high school to go right into SPCC and then go right into this program. So.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We actually, to your point, Mr. Commissioner, we have 4 paramedic students graduating in August. We've sponsored these students through paramedic program. We have an advanced EMT class that'll transition to paramedic this summer. We have 4 additional students in that. They will graduate with their paramedic in January, assuming they're all successful. The Health Sciences Academy, we've explored that with Atrium Health through Monroe Middle and Monroe High School to generate pipelines and talent there. We're exploring a few things in partnership with Amazon. Right now, for talent pipeline, they actually pay to train their people to get them into other career choices. So we're exploring every avenue to build our own talent. Where we see the challenge is retention due to the model.
Right.
So,
okay.
Is there any questions I can answer beyond that?
I'm sorry, when you said students, were you referring to SPCC students or
Currently.
UCPS students?
The students we have in place are teammates. We have 8 teammates currently enrolled in South Piedmont Community College for paramedic programs with different graduation times.
So is there any partnership with the K-12 students that are in the medical academy program, or any pipeline to get them to you or to SPCC? Because most of our academies, those students specialize in this training, like firefighting. That's a big one. Their junior and senior year, so they are certified by the time they graduate. So can you speak to the K-12 students or the high school students at all?
Yes, ma'am. We're working with South Piedmont to build, so a lot of those academies, they do a dual enrollment process with South Piedmont Community College to obtain those credentials.
And you're talking about the Monroe High.
Monroe High, Monroe Middle builds them into the program in Monroe High. They eventually roll over into South Piedmont enrollment. They attend South Piedmont a number of days a week during their general high school education. South Piedmont is building a program so they can obtain their EMT during that time.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're working on that.
Is there an age, there's probably an age requirement, I would imagine, 21 or 18, or what is it?
It's 18, sir.
So 18 can be at EMS.
Yes.
So they could, by dual enrolling at SPCC and then being at Monroe, they can get a lot of the education to perform the duties of an EMT.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. The challenge we see and why it requires some special education is the credit hour requirement is pretty hefty for EMT. I want to say it's well above the 3 mark, which is your standard credit hour course. And that's what they're trying to juggle, is how do we get these people through a program in an allowable amount of time? So in a semester in high school, we may have to break it into 2 semesters in high school for them to obtain that. So that's what we're working with them now.
So that sounds very promising. Is there any similar pipeline to get them from the EMT training to a paramedic training?
Yes, ma'am. That's what we've been doing with our current teammates. We've been investing in them. The 4 that started last August, they'll graduate with their paramedic in August, and we started another 4 in January to enroll in an advanced EMT class, which is that middle ground between the two. They'll attain their advanced in May. In June, they'll automatically roll into their paramedic program. They'll finish that in January.
Nice. So do you have any vacancies right now? Like, how many vacancies, if any, do you have for each group that you're having trouble filling?
So I don't have the precise numbers off the top of my head. We are carrying heavy vacancies on the paramedic side. We've been low to mid-20s for almost 12 months, if not more. EMT, we've filled numerous times. We might run 1 or 2 vacancies for a short period and fill it again.
So
I'm
did
sorry.
I hear you correctly, about 20 vacancies?
On the paramedic
on the-
side only,
Wow.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Don't sit there like a knot on a log, ask us.
Well, no, again, it's just, Atrium does have more information to present. We didn't want to get too far ahead of you all because you hadn't had a chance to hear any of this. So if the board would like information about what a hybrid model would look like or how we incorporate these BLS units, we would recommend that we bring this to you probably in April or May, just with more detail. We'd bring our CCOM folks in to explain exactly what when someone calls, what's that going to look like under these scenarios. Again, we didn't want to get too far ahead. We haven't done a whole lot of this work. So if the board was interested in getting that information, that's what we would probably recommend.
It would probably be a good idea to get more information. I know Commissioner Helms has been sick and out lately, so he and I both were sitting in a lot of these meetings, but it would be helpful, I think, for the other 3 commissioners to get the information and then make a decision from there. Now, the decision points that we're going to have is what, continuing on with the current contract, updating the contract? What kind of decision points are you looking for?
And again, that's up to the board, but yes, once you receive the information, the more detailed information, do we want to try to incorporate that into a new agreement with Atrium Health? If so, what is the criteria? Do we want to look at response times? Do we want to have an advisory group meet on a regular basis to say, okay, we've identified what we think is a solution to our staffing problem. Now, how are we going to know if that's working? So there's going to be some management of that process as it's implemented. Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? This is not necessarily a short-term switch that you can flip and fix this. So if we were going to move forward with either of these scenarios, we would recommend probably a 3-year extension to get it in place, see how it's working, and then we can adjust as necessary. Again, we haven't done any of that yet. We can certainly bring that back to you, but we wanted to get this in front of you to see if there is enough validity to bring back more information.
Atrium, okay with that too, or? You speaking on behalf of all of Atrium, or just? An extension for a time till we can figure out the model, that would be okay with Atrium?
Well, we currently have an extension until the end of June of 2024.
Right.
So we have enough time to bring you the information, let you all hear that, and then if there is a desire to incorporate that into a new agreement, negotiate that agreement and bring it back to you all probably by the end of this year so we have it in place.
Right.
We don't want to get too close to the end of that contract extension and not have a plan.
So, with that then, since we have one, do you want to go ahead and start moving in that direction, or is this something, again, that we need to wait a month, or?
Go ahead, Brian.
No.
Oh.
Go right ahead, you're ready.
You've received some pretty general information here. If If the board's heard enough that they want us to try to start negotiating what an agreement incorporating these provisions would look like, we can certainly do that. But if the board would like more detailed information, we can bring that back. It's really up to the desire of the board.
Yep, I think so. Just be aware that we kind of need to know which deployment model do you want? Do you want a hybrid? Do you want the BLS, ALS? That will help us in crafting the agreement. Am I correct on that?
Yes,
Patrick?
and it's really, is there anything you've seen here today that is an absolute no? You don't want more information on it, you just know now you don't want to incorporate it. And if the answer is no, then yes, we can bring you back more information. All the work we would do in the next month or two will be incorporated into an agreement, so it's not necessarily lost time, but it gives you another opportunity to see how this would actually work in practice.
Can you go back to the slide on the recommendations from the committee? Okay. So, the top recommendation is a hybrid of the static and dynamic?
Yes, yeah, so
Deployment.
a hybrid model is a static dynamic model. So yes, you can call it the hybrid, and that addresses both static and dynamic deployments.
So that is or is not number 2?
Well, so what this was saying is they didn't want BLS units in static locations. So you don't want 2 EMTs on a truck in New Salem. You want a paramedic out there in case they get that code 1 call that they can respond with the appropriate level of care. So that was really just saying that if we're going to do this, we want paramedics at all of those static locations because they're more rural. So trying to get an ALS unit to them will take longer. And if something does happen, they want the appropriate level of care.
Okay. So all 8 of these is what came out of the committee?
There's a little bit of blending between some of them. Like number 4 is similar to number 3, but generally the 2 main recommendations that came out, and I say recommendations, considerations, because there were positives and disadvantages to both. But these were the 2 that generated the most support in looking more into. And again, the Paramedic Academy, EMT Academy, those are already happening, so it's really just continue what we've been doing. This paramedic shortage is not going away. It was not a COVID dip. There's estimated to be a 40,000 paramedic shortage currently, and that's only going to grow over the next 10 years. So this is not a problem that we can wait out. We have to think creatively about this.
And some of the things we had discussed in those meetings and had discussion with Atrium about, one of the things was making them county employees again and making them under the county. The issue with that was that you have some that move from place to place and they could build up a retirement. But in discussions with some of the folks that actually do the job, this is a hard job. This is not something that's very simple and easy and fun to go to work every day. This is a stressful, imagine that every day you go into emergencies and people dying and all the problems that you can imagine they see, children, adults, everything horrific that you can imagine. So it's not something that really, again, it's like a 30-year career necessarily. It's something that they go into because they really love it and they really want to help people, but is it a 30-year career that they're going to retire with? These things are kind of just like he said, these are considerations from the stakeholders, and the concern was too, you can't turn this is like a battleship. You just can't turn it around like a motorboat. It's got to be done in the right way. That's why we extended it that extra year. So, if I were going to say anything today, try to base something on these recommendations, and the ALS, BLS. The thought again was giving somebody a break. Letting them letting them get out of that truck. Maybe 1 week or 1 shift on, 1 shift off, doing being able to have, it's really hard to sit in a truck for what, how many hours a day?
It's 12-hour shifts.
12 hours a day. You may go to a store to be able to go to use the restroom, or, you may be at a fire department, you may be, just on the side of the road somewhere. So, how many meetings do we have on this? It was
I believe it was six
Yeah.
total meetings.
over months, and I hate that Richard's not here because he had a lot of input in the meeting, and these are just all the ideas that came out of it. So this is a lot well thought out. If you're ready to give Patrick the go-ahead to, do something with a possible new contract, it would be, this has all been vetted by firefighters, by EMS, by Atrium, by Union County. Novant was in the meeting. So a little bit of everybody was in the meeting.
Do you need a motion or just?
What motion do you need?
So if the board's comfortable from what I'm hearing, we can work both avenues. We can start putting together the framework of a new agreement that incorporates that and have Atrium come back and present the detailed information of what these two provisions would mean once they're implemented.
And I would like to make sure that that includes looking at the fees and a possible increase.
Okay.
And I also want to look at, make sure that, I don't know what we can or cannot do, but I want to make sure that we're looking at public libraries, post office, schools, fire departments as possible hubs or location for them to have a place to get out and go get a cup of coffee or use the restroom and not have to rely on a food line or whatever.
Sure.
It was a number one thing I heard last year when I was out in the community. These are very, very important people in our community, and they need to be treated as such.
Absolutely.
As such. So I definitely want to look at the fees, these locations and partnership and taking care of these employees, and bringing back a plan for us that would make more sense than what we have today.
Great.
All right, you got that motion? Make it make more sense. Right?
Exactly, make more sense.
All right, you need to vote, on all those in favor, any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the library update.
So Nina Chaffin, the director of the libraries, is here just to give you an update on the Southwest Regional Library, some of their fundraising efforts, and in the budget, you're going to see the staffing for that library to come online. So going over some of those numbers and explaining, why we are recommending the personnel we are. So, Oops, sorry. Yeah. There's probably a better way to do that, wasn't there?
Here we go. This. Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and fellow commissioners and everyone else, management team. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share a little bit about the library and then more specifically about the newest library that we're currently constructing. So a little bit about the library. Everything on this slide is what we have to capture and send as part of our annual application for state aid to public libraries. In library land, we count everything and everything, so there's pretty much a statistic for anything. And while that's a lot of numbers, I wanted to say we haven't fully recovered from COVID. Back before COVID, our door count, which we consider in-person visits, used to be over 500,000, so we're increasing, but we're not back to where we used to be. We are still circulating quite a few items. We own about 150,000 materials, and those materials circulate over 1 million times a year. So that's pretty good circulation when you compare us against other libraries in the state. And then we do a lot of programs. We do the regular story times. We just restarted our baby story time. And then we do things for recreational purposes. We do teen programs. And then we do things to help the community as well. We're getting ready to launch our small business passport program again in partnership with SPCC. That will run over the summer, where we encourage folks to visit a small business but also visit the library. So then once you do those two things together, you're entered to win a prize from all of the small businesses that participated. So. One of our big partnerships is with the school system. So we have a LEAP partnership, which is library and educators as partners. where we provide digital library cards to all of the Union County Public School students. And then we provide library cards to the teachers as well. So the teacher card has a little bit more benefits than a regular library card does. And then they also have access to our digital resources to help supplement their educational instruction. We do a teacher newsletter. We try to do things that make their jobs easier as much as we can. We don't want to overload them with information, but we're here to help. And we have a really good relationship with the media coordinators. We just helped last week at Battle of the Books for the middle school. Cuthbertson Middle School was the winner, and their coach also happens to serve on our foundation board. So that was a double win for us. So we do things like that with the school system pretty regularly, and if they need something from us, we're more than happy to try to figure out a way to make that work. One of the good relationships we have is we're trying to maximize the resources that we're buying. So the school system buys things and we buy things. And for some reason, the things we buy are much cheaper than the things that they try to sell the school system. However, our population is the exact same. So we worked together with World Book online to basically allow access to the schools without having to pay for it. So we basically have to pay for World Book because no one prints encyclopedias anymore, because the minute you print them, they're out of date. So we have everything online. So we worked out a deal to where they could access our World Book online and not have to pay for it. So we're trying to do that more and more so that the students have access to things that they need. We want to make sure all of these programs, all of these services and resources that we provide actually align with what the community is looking for. So our last community impact survey was done in 2020, and it was done for a couple of reasons. One, we were planning to do a strategic plan, so we wanted to hear from our folks directly about what they were looking for, what they needed out of the library to ensure that when we were creating our plan, it was aligned. And so I just pulled out some of the most positive comments that we received. But overall, we got a really good response rate with over 1,000 folks who answered. And the folks that answered, they used the Union West Library. That was their home location. Monroe was right behind that. And when we had a whole list of resources where you rate what was highly satisfactory, what needed improvement, the staff assistance was the #1 most highly rated item in the list. So I thought that was very nice. And it's nice to know because we have a wonderful staff. They're all there to help serve. That is their ultimate goal. So it's nice when you see that reflected in that survey. And then the top 3 services and resources were the books, the staff, and the digital collections, which is good to see because our digital circulation is not nearly as high as most would think. It's still high, but not. Our print circulation will always outpace the digital. Well, I don't know if I should say always, but for right now it does. And then we took all of this survey feedback and then we did create a strategic plan for, it took us about a year to come up with this plan. We had a consultant come in. They helped us create a strategic plan, a staffing analysis, and a transitional plan for the new library. So we were able to do all 3 of those with one grant. And these are the 6 initiatives that came out of that strategic planning process. And so our goal is each year we focus on one, and for this year we are focused on initiative number 6, which is all about creating programming. So we're doing that internally and externally. So we have improved our programming processes and policies for the staff so that they're able to work more closely with each other. Prior to that, it was basically everyone had to do X number of programs in a given year. So we wanted to have more collaboration amongst the staff. So we have tweaked our practices, and we have been doing that since January, and so far so good. And then we are trying to come up with more programs that the community is looking for. So we've done a few things. We have a Medicare 101 program coming up where we've partnered with the Council on Aging. That was very popular. And then we do fun stuff too. The teens are doing a Nailed It program on making some sort of beehive. So we'll see how that turns out. So that's a little bit about the library system as a whole. Now we can talk about the Southwest Regional Library. And if you all have questions, please feel free to interrupt at any point in time. Just a little quick background of how we ended up with regional libraries in the county. Back in 1999, that Board of Commissioners at the time adopted a policy where they wanted to make sure that we had owned all of the buildings, or at least leased all the buildings that the libraries were in, and then we had regional libraries, not libraries in each municipality. So originally, they said we're going to build 2 libraries, one for Weddington and one for Waxhaw. And that was all fine and dandy. That was their plan. And in 2006, there was actually money put forth to make that project come to fruition for Weddington. But if you remember, the economy then went south. So everything stopped. I came to the county in 2009, and that's all I've ever heard was this Weddington Library that we were going to build. And I have folks on the foundation board who have been on the board for 23 years, and that's the same story that they have heard as well. So it was like the library that just couldn't be built. So in 2009, everything stopped, but then in 2016, it was all revamped when the current board at that time voted to put a $10 million bond on the ballot. And so that's kind of where we are today. So once we knew that that bond was successful, we launched our planning process again. So we held many, many town hall meetings. I know Commissioner Richard Helms was at a few of those when we did this way back when, and I think it was 2018, 2019, where we went to all the different municipalities. We let people come tell us all the things that they wanted to tell us about what the library should do for them, what the community should look like, and then we gathered all that feedback and kind of narrowed it down into here's what we heard. So these were the 3 key questions that were asked. How would you describe your ideal community? What do you need to make this happen? And then what should the library offer to best serve your community? So it was more about how can the library fit into what you envision versus what can the library do for just you. And I will say on that last question where the library is best serving the community, all of those bullet points have been captured in the new library except for the last 2. We don't have a community garden currently planned or an outdoor amphitheater, but everything else on that list will be available in the new building. So how much is all of it going to cost? So we had $10 million from our bond, but that was not enough to get to where we need to be in today's dollars. So we've tried to come up with ways to kind of spread the gap around. So we've gotten some ARPA funds. We got a state legislative directed grant, which was very nice, and we were very thankful for that. And then we have the Library Foundation. They have raised some funds as well. They currently have pledges for $210,000. Our anchor gift was from Harris Teeter, so we were excited about that. And then there's some other proceeds from the bond. So this total budget that we're looking at was $14.7 million. And then on the operational side for this coming fiscal year, these are the requests that we have directly related to the new library. The biggest is staffing. So we currently have 9 positions in the Waxhaw Library, and those will be incorporated into the new library. They're all going to move with, they'll all move to the new library, but that won't be enough to adequately staff that new library. So we've been given some already as well for the new library, but then those are the remaining requests at the top of the budget chart. So in order to put together what kind of staff we need for the new library, we did a staffing analysis. So again, we worked with the consultant, and we looked at the staff that we had currently. So when we were wanting to staff the new library, we didn't want to just say we need X, Y, and Z, because if the new library is fully staffed and everything's great, what about all the rest of the libraries? You want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So we started with what we had, and this was done back in 2020 or 2021, 2020 and 2021. And this is some of the highlights of what we found, the consultant found, obviously. And so I wanted to pull a few of them out just so you can see how we rank. So we're very high in how we're used, and then we're kind of low in the side of the staff when you compare us against the 83 North Carolina libraries. And again, all of us libraries have to capture all of those statistics for the state aid. So it's very easy to compare yourself. All of this lives on the state library's website. So we then took the state library standards. So most states have standards as in regards to what services you should be doing, what they should look like. So you've got benchmarks to compare yourself to so that there's some sort of a consistent level of service across the state regardless of funding. And so these charts kind of break that down from the staffing side. So the blue one explains what your FTE should look like per 1,000 folks in your population. The orange chart then breaks that down if we base that off of our current population as of today. So in North Carolina, the essential staff FTEs for the library should be 73.09. And then this chart shows where we are today in relation to those numbers. So we have a current FTE count for fiscal year of 23 of 64.79. So we're negative 8.3 when we look at North Carolina. We do meet Kentucky's standard, but they did have the lowest numbers in the chart. So just so that you understood just kind of where we were, and this is what we used then to determine where we needed to go. Okay, so the building plans. Our piece of property, as you know, sits next to Cuthbertson Middle School and Cuthbertson High School. And we're so fortunate that the school system had this piece of land. They had 34 acres that were not developed. And they originally, I think, were going to build an elementary school, but then they no longer needed that. So we were able to get 15 of those acres through their gracious donation. And so we are extremely fortunate for that because that maximized our building footprint then. We didn't have to pay for the land. So there's 15 acres there, which is it's lovely because the rest of the libraries, there's no outside space. If you've been to the Monroe Library, there's a parking lot. So there's not much you can do there. The one in Union West, there's no outdoor space either. And the one in Marshville, there's nothing either. The space is on the side closest to the road. You really don't want to do things by the road. So this library will actually have green space that we can do things outside, which is what we heard a lot of when we held those community sessions. This is what it currently looks like as of last week. I think it was last Wednesday. They've got a construction camera out there, and so they're making progress. But ultimately, this is what it will look like from Cuthbertson Road. This will be what you see. But you'll enter on the side. So underneath that awning is the main entrance. So this is what you'll see when you park and then come up to the main doors. And that's just a rendering of the Cuthbertson Road side. And one thing to make note is we have another service level or another service point at this library. We have a drive-up window, so you could drive up, tell us what holds you have, and we can get those for you, and you wouldn't have to leave your car. And then this is our courtyard, which we're really excited about. So that'll all be green space on the interior of the library, so we're not facing the road, we're not near the road, so we can do things outside, programming-wise. And here's some cutouts of the space. I know those are kind of hard to see. And then there's some interior renderings. So the lobby, when you walk in, will have a meeting room off to the right. And then when you walk through the main lobby and look to your right, the children's area will be there. And story time is big business for us. So we designed a space that is flexible. We didn't actually build a room. We just built a little nook so that if story time gets really full, it'll just spill out so that we can maximize our space and not have to turn folks away. And then this is the adult side. And the nice benefit of this space is that there's 4 study rooms in here. So we don't have any study rooms in the current Waxhaw Library, so there'll be 4 quiet spaces for folks to utilize in this space. So this is the layout of the floor plan. The children's area, like I said, is off to the right. And there is a dedicated children's programming space, which we don't have that anywhere. So we're really excited about that. Then that's the adult area. Those 4 bump outs that face the road are the study rooms. And then we have a dedicated teen space because we are so close to the middle school and so close to the high school. We want the kids to come after school and utilize the space. And that's another, on the staffing side, we have asked to have teen staff in this location as well. We have a meeting room. I think the maximum capacity is 50 in that space. And then we have a STEAM lab, which the only other library that has that is in Monroe. Here is our current construction schedule. So hopefully, they say by March of 2024, we should be perhaps doing a ribbon cutting at the same time next year. We'll see if all things go according to plan. And I think that's all I have for you. Do you have any questions?
There was a slide that I would like to go back to.
Sure.
It was the one that was showing that we were like number 22 out of 83 libraries in the state.
This one?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I have the entire staffing analysis if you really want to read all of it. Or if you have any more questions about it, I'll be happy to share that too.
So the one that jumped out to me, so we're 71st in the state for library visits.
Right. And our visits aren't even as high as they used to be.
Nina, just to clarify, 71 is on the high
At
side.
the high
right?
side, yes. Yeah, you want to be high, not low.
That doesn't mean that we're.
Yeah, I was assuming that
Yes.
meant we were like
We're close
towards
to
the
number
bottom.
one almost.
Okay.
We're towards- we're
almost
number
close
one.
to being
Yes.
at the top of actual visitors.
Yes.
Okay, because that was
I'm sorry.
concerning me.
I'm sorry. Yes, you want to be high. Yes.
So 71's a good thing.
It is, it is,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
You don't want to be low.
So if you look at the other one where it says 22nd out of
Yes.
83, that's actually the bottom.
Yes.
That actually is where we're
Yes.
not. We are actually not doing as well.
Yeah,
Even
we're in the
though
bottom
those
third.
numbers they're a little counterintuitive.
Yes,
but-
they are. I apologize. I should have
Oh, no,
clarified
no,
that.
okay, okay,
I'm glad we're all on the same page now.
yeah.
Yes, so the-
I mean, because we are in the middle of March Madness, so you want to be in the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, you know. Okay, okay, that did concern me,
Okay.
so I'm glad we went back to that.
Yes.
Talk to me about COVID.
Yes.
Because, you know, for the most part, if you go out to a restaurant, you know, go out to eat, there's wait times. Why do you think we're only like half getting back to where we were when everything else is wide open? Like, what are you working on to get those visitors back to the library?
So we haven't fully rolled out all the stuff that we used to do. So, for example, big business for us is kids. So a lot of folks weren't comfortable bringing their kids and utilizing shared resources. So, you know, when you check materials out, they go to your house, and they go to the next person's house, and so forth and so on. So there was a lot of concern about that. So we clean everything. So that is part of our ritual now. Where prior to COVID, we didn't probably clean the books as frequently as we could have, but we do that now all the time. And so we don't have all of our toys out that we have, so we do play with purpose. So a big piece of early literacy is play. So you want kids to play. That's how they learn how to read, how they learn how to interact. And it's hard to keep those things clean, so some of that is missing. And then we did registration for everything to keep the numbers down. So folks still think we require registration. So that has curbed attendance as well, because our registration system, to be honest with you, was a little bit cumbersome. It was made on the fly. It didn't quite work. We made it work, but you had to sign up at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon for story time for the next week. So it just wasn't where, before COVID, if you wanted to come to story time, you just showed up. But we wanted to make sure that we had enough space and people weren't crowded. So those practices have changed, but people kind of still think they're being done. So we're trying to work on changing all of that and making sure the messaging is correct. And like I said, we just relaunched our baby time, story time, so it's getting folks used to these things exist. So we're trying our best, but hopefully by the end of the summer. Because summer learning, we do a whole summer reading program. It's called summer learning. And those numbers have increased as well, but not to where they used to be. So we're working on it.
Yeah, I would hope because Union County Public Schools has been back 2 consecutive years. So I was a little shocked to
Yeah,
hear
it's
that
not-
the libraries were not back.
We are not, but
Okay.
we're working on it.
Is it a staffing issue? You can't find, like, do you have vacancies? Is it a staffing issue? Because there doesn't seem to be a problem, you know, in the 53 schools, in our charter schools. So
Yes.
I'm wondering what the holdup is.
We did have a staffing issue, yes, where you would get folks in, and then the level it takes to get them to where they need to be, and then they would leave, because the bulk of our staff is part-time staff. So we don't have full-time staff. It's more part-time than full. So when those folks come in and our hours are not always ideal, you have to work evenings and weekends. They say they want to do it, but then when it comes down to it, they leave. So that's a constant turnover, so you're constantly training and you're kind of playing catch-up. Right now, we're good. We only have 1 or 2 vacancies, but it took us a while there to get qualified applicants. That was one of our more challenging times, but the staffing is much better than it used to be.
I'd like to give you an idea on that.
Yeah.
You're right beside Cuthbertson High School,
Yes. Yes.
nights and weekends.
Yep.
That's a lot of kids would probably like a job. How much you pay?
I think we pay well,
Yeah.
quite frankly. Yeah, I do. I think we pay really well.
Well, we're doing budget. I don't know if that's good or bad. So. But I would say that would be a good opportunity
Yes.
to get some kids from Cuthbertson High School.
We do, and we have a very, very robust teen volunteer program where they have to apply. We have a teen advisory board where they have to apply to that, and that is a more intense program. But we take a lot of volunteers, and then there are several staff members that we have that were former volunteers.
Good.
I'd like to jump on that idea too. So we have teacher cadets. So a lot of our seniors really could graduate their junior year, so they might have flex hours and go somewhere in the community and work. But then we have teacher cadets, where students that are interested in maybe pursuing a education degree. I didn't know if you had ever spoken to Brian Davis about maybe, you know, media cadets or something where seniors that may want to walk in June as opposed to December, maybe they could be cadets in the
Sure.
different libraries or something so that we
Sure.
can get the, because
Yeah.
I would definitely assume these teenagers would be really good at play. And and try to get our numbers back up in the libraries. I don't know that you can answer this, Patrick, maybe you can. So if the bond was for $10 million, and this is approximately $4 million over budget, what was the process to try to, you know, stay within what the voters approved? And I greatly appreciate it that, you know, ARPA dollars, you know, state grants, and the Library Foundation. I'm not sure if that comes to $4 million difference, but just coming from a capital improvement background, we've always tried to stay with what the voters approved. And if something came in over budget or whatever, we would trim from the projects because, you know, we could move things within the projects. But, so I just wanted to understand your process on how you did or did not stay with what the voters approved.
It's a good question, and we built 3 major facilities all in a short period of time: the Emergency Services Building, the Sheriff's Office, and the library. And we got fortunate on Emergency Services and the Sheriff to where we locked in pricing before the supply chain issues hit with COVID. We did not get that fortunate with the library, and we saw cost escalate 40% within a very short period of time. So the previous board, we came to them, basically said, we can't deliver what we said we were going to deliver to the voters based on square footage with this dollar amount. It's at the same time that ARPA funding became available, and we said there is an opportunity to put ARPA dollars into this project to get it whole based on what we said the size was going to be. At that time, if they didn't want to put those ARPA dollars into it, we're going to have to scale the project way back from a size standpoint. So at that time, it was just the board's decision to put the money into the project from those ARPA dollars to get closer to what we told the voters we were on a square footage basis, not necessarily on the price basis.
So how much ARPA dollars went to the library?
It ended up where no ARPA dollars went to it. Originally, there was 3.5 million of ARPA dollars appropriated to it. Beverly, could you explain the financial mechanism we used?
Okay, so no ARPA dollars are going to the,
That is correct. It was originally part of the committee that said we wanted to put ARPA dollars towards that, but as Treasury released further compliance for ARPA dollars, it was indicated that this did not qualify as a project that we could spend ARPA dollars on. So we then came back to the board and said, this doesn't qualify. Do you still want to move forward with this project at this cost? The answer was yes. We redid the funding sources, and it's actually county dollars that is going towards the project, not ARPA dollars. So we had to switch the funding sources from ARPA to county dollars at that time. We had to do that with several projects, the public safety training facility, the aseptic training facility for South Piedmont that we originally thought we could spend ARPA dollars on, no longer qualified. So when we came back to the board in September to reallocate the ARPA dollars, it freed up money in the general fund with the revenue replacement dollars and rehiring a public sector staff with ARPA dollars that then freed up general county fund balance that we are now using for this particular project.
I think it does set a pretty interesting precedence, especially for Union County Public Schools that has been held to whatever the bond said. So I think this is going to be an interesting conversation when other projects come in over. So that causes a little bit of heartburn for me.
Sure. And I fully expect that the school's project will come in higher, honestly, in talking with their staff. They've faced a lot of same challenges that we have with cost increases, and we're well aware that they have some concerns themselves.
But this bond was years ago
Yes, ma'am.
when the schools had the $53 million bond and did not go over.
Yes,
So I just want to be real fair here.
Absolutely, and we certainly understand that, and that's why I know the board will have some decisions in front of you because of the challenges we know the schools are facing now with their project. I don't think they have their GMP yet, but I suspect that will be close, that they'll
Okay,
have
but
it. I'm talking about
you're
the new
talking about a
project. I'm talking about the new
2020
project.
bond,
Yes, ma'am.
but we're talking about a 2016 bond, so it's a little bit different.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ryan, did you have any questions? I've got a couple. With the high school students, again, hiring them would be a fantastic idea, probably. One thing that we've seen lately is a lot of concern from parents about items found in school libraries. And, last year we had a little bit of an issue with some stuff that were coming out in the newsletter, and we asked to tone that down. And there were some things that I saw, and these are concerns that I had, was that, we're looking at there was a class for coding for girls. But it said if you identify as a girl. So boys could come to the class if they identified as a girl. Why not just say everybody can come? We might want to watch eliminating anybody from any classes. Like we do a ladies only class for concealed carry. I understand the benefit of having the girls come in and do a coding class. However, in this day and age, to eliminate anybody from a class offered at a public library is a little bit different than a private business. So we definitely may want to stay away from just like girls only, guys only, any kind of, any in between, whatever. Any kind of books. I had a concern about like, it's one thing to do like a history month, women's history, black history. A little bit different to put out a sexuality history month when you do or a sexuality pride month and then do a display of books. If the books are in the library, it's not that big of a problem as long as they're not graphic. But I'm a deer hunter, and we have what's called a corn pile. And that's how you attract the deer to where you're hunting.
Sure.
So in a library where it's a public library, where adults and children are mixed, I would hate to see a couple things. I would hate to see a predator watching those books, which we can't keep people out of the library. We have homeless, all kinds of folks come to the library. And then we have people who might see somebody looking at those books in a section or going to a table and then bullying them for some reason. So a couple different reasons behind like a sexuality type based program. And I think the parents would feel a lot better about it and that their children are not going to be going and getting involved in that kind of thing. So just some ideas.
Sure.
And I think we've expressed those before, but you know, hopefully we get people flowing into these libraries,
Yes.
You know, enjoying their time there, learning new things. You know, libraries are a wonderful place,
agree.
especially for families who can't afford
I agree.
internet, you know, families that can't, you know, that don't have some of the things that other families have.
Yes.
And we want to keep it that way. The Waxhaw Library that's in existence now, are we going to be shifting those employees and books to
Yes.
the new library?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so that one will be closing down so that everybody's aware, right?
Yes.
There's some possibility that Waxhaw may take it up or, you know.
So the town of Waxhaw owns that building. That is theirs. We just lease it. So I guess it's ultimately up to them.
So they may put books in there
They
as a
might.
town. They
Yep,
could choose to
as
do
a
that.
town, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you for your time. Thank you for your
Thank you all.
presentation.
Thank you.
All right, and that's conclusion of our work session, correct?
That is correct. We're a little early, so.
So we want to adjourn now and then come back at 5 o'clock. We've got a closed session at 5 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
And then open meeting at 6 o'clock.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay, so we just need to have a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.